much and good afternoon. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak to you, and I hope that you're having a really good convention. I've been asked to talk about the experience of the 30% Club, and I hope that what I have to say might give you some encouragement as you embark on perhaps something similar in Malaysia. Now, as you know from the kind introduction, I'm Chief Executive of a fund management company, and we are owned by an American institution, BNY Mellon. And quite a long time ago, I decided to set up a women's development network, very common these days in many of these big companies. And we had lots of exciting events, always invited men to come along, and I got great feedback. People said how inspiring they were. The trouble was, didn't seem to actually inspire anybody to do anything, because as I looked around the room, I was still very much, or often the only woman in the room, very few other women at senior levels. So I'm afraid I became rather disillusioned. This went on for several years, and then one day I was invited to speak at a diversity week at Goldman Sachs, and afterwards we had a lunch, and there were quite a lot of different organizations represented there, men and women. And we each shared our own experiences and stories. And what I realized then was that all of us were trying very hard, but we were all stuck at between 10 or 15% at most women at senior levels. So I came away from that lunch thinking, well, frankly, we must be doing something wrong. If we're having so much effort and so little to show for it, we can't be targeting our efforts correctly. And it took a few months, this was November 2009, and it took a few months for me to work out what might be different or what we might be able to do differently. I don't support mandatory quotas. You may want to ask me questions about why later on, but I believe that businesses have to own change. It can be very much supported by government and encouraged by good practice. But I think to really make something happen in a sustainable way, then it needs to really be believed in. But I realized that we did need a numeric goal, and that's where the idea of having 30% as a specific target. We're trying to get there by the end of next year. And we obviously run our businesses with numeric goals and other objectives that we can actually measure progress against. And so that was the first thing I realized was missing. The other aspect was involving those in power more. And to be honest, at that point, and this wasn't very long ago, obviously, about 5 years ago, it was still very much women talking to women. And very few men were involved in this as a business issue, as an issue about making our companies more modern. So in November 2010, we launched with just 7 founding chairman supporters. I asked some people that I knew, and some few enlightened ones said, yes, they were very frustrated about the lack of women that they could find to sit on their boards, and had seen the positive impact that having women had made. So we launched then. Actually, could you put out the first chart, please? There's a chart which hopefully will show. There you go. And you'll see that since then, and there's a very flat line up until about 2010 when we launched, and since then the proportion has gone from just over 12.5% to 23%. And obviously, although we're not there yet, the shape of the line is quite exciting. And I think when we look around the world, it's very hard to find another example or many other examples of such change, even though there has been such a lot of talk in so many countries over the past few years. So this is in 4 years, nearly doubled. And there are a few other statistics beneath the chart there. But one I'd like to highlight, which isn't on there actually, at one point, is there are no all-male boards left in the FTSE now. So when we started in 2010, there were 21 FTSE boards with no women directors, and now there are none. There are only 10%, 25 all-male boards left in the 250, the next biggest companies down. And now that still sounds quite a lot, but when we launched again, there were over half, 131. And I have to give credit to the business leaders. I mean, this is not a mandatory change, and this is not something that they've been sort of threatened with anything bad that will happen to them if they don't do it. This change has happened through voluntary action. And I do think that actually, with hindsight now, I can see that there's been a shift in the discussion over that 4-year period, so that it's now seen very much as a business issue and not a women's issue. Of course, it's wonderful for us women too to have more opportunities, but business leaders now see it as an imperative if they're going to convince their shareholders, if they're publicly listed, that they are a modern, enlightened company that is also doing the right thing as well as the bright thing. So what we have now is 118 members in the UK. If I can put up the next slide, please. I'm just showing a few examples here. Some of the names may be familiar with you. I was actually at lunch with Douglas's deputy chairman at HSBC, Sir Simon Robertson, yesterday, and he talked about, they obviously, I know from my day job, are very big in Asia, including Malaysia, and so they have been a very loyal supporter, and Douglas actually has talked about their support of the 30% Club and membership of it in his annual shareholder meeting as one of the advantages or one of the plus points of the company. In the US, we have launched quite recently, in June of this year formally, and we only have 34 CEOs and chairman supporters to date, but I thought you might be interested to see the names of Warren Buffett, Larry Fink, and Peter Grauer among them. And one of the things that I've realized, of course, is that perhaps more by accident than design, I have to admit, by having created something of a club around this, then these gentlemen, mainly gentlemen, there are very few female chairs in either country, have been exerting something of peer group pressure on each other, and it's become quite a global network of chairmen who are very proud of what they're doing in this space. And that wasn't the case when we started. I don't want to imply in any way that this has been plain sailing. In the first few months, when I naively wrote to chairmen to ask them would they support this initiative, I had a lot of very negative comments, almost hate mail back. People felt that it was a special interest issue, that it wasn't anything to do with them. And some of those very same individuals have now completely come round to it, and it's not a publicity exercise. They're actually very evangelical about this. So it has been an exciting journey, and as I look back, there's been a few things, obviously, as I mentioned, not finished yet, but we have changed as well as going more globally. There are chapters about to launch in Canada and Australia. We have a 30% Club in Ireland and South Africa. There is interest from countries with quotas like Norway and Italy, and also in in some Middle Eastern countries as well. But actually, could I have the next slide, please, because I wanted to highlight how we work. So what we've been trying to do is create some cohesion around the fragmented efforts. A lot of the people doing fantastic work in this area, for example, mentoring companies and headhunters who are particularly good at finding female talented candidates for roles. We have been trying to bring those groups together to make the whole greater than the sum of the parts. We've also been trying to fill in gaps where nothing has existed. So, for example, we're now right the way back in the schoolroom. It's all very well if we get to 30% women on boards at the end of next year or soon after, as I think is likely. But if we don't have a great talent coming through at all levels, then it's going to be something of a hollow victory. So we now have initiatives, say, right away into the schoolroom, where we have business leaders go out and speak in schools, both girls' schools and co-educational schools, talking about the importance of gender equality, but also encouraging girls to consider traditionally male-dominated careers. We keep trying to make sure that we understand the problem of why so few women don't get promoted. We've done a lot of studies looking at everything from business psychology and we've used a firm that specializes in psychology, right the way through to much more practical issues around work allocation in law firms and the whole business model. So there's now a team of about 1,000 people involved in the UK, working on different levels of the initiative. We have 16 working groups, which I couldn't fit onto this page. I decided not to worry with that. And really what's been exciting is seeing a movement created so that there's now a real sense that we will get the result. And we are going to get to the tipping point, we believe, where this doesn't need to happen anymore. The ultimate goal of the 30% Club, as well as renaming itself the 50% Club, is to self-destruct. There is no need, I hope, for this initiative in a few years' time in this country. Now, we also make sure that we involve shareholders. There is a big group, 23 institutional investors and asset owners. So they include BlackRock and PIMCO, some of the very largest in the world. In the UK, the largest fund management group is Legal & General Investment Management. They own 4% of every single FTSE and 250 company because most of their funds are indexed. And they are plugged into this, and we are making sure there is no stone unturned. We are very joined up with public policy. And I wanted to spend a few minutes on this because I think it's extremely important. And I know that in Malaysia there is very great encouragement from the government to move to 30% women on boards and in senior levels. And what we've seen in this country, soon after we launched, a gentleman called Lord Davis published a review. He's a member of the House of Lords. He is a Labour peer. But this review had cross-party political support, and he published a review into why there were so few women on UK company boards, and he suggested a blueprint for change, and he set out 10 steps. And effectively, the 30% Club has been working in close partnership. He's a great friend of mine now. I didn't know him so well before all of this. We work together so that it's a very concerted double act between public policy and encouragement from a public policy standpoint and business-led change. And the final ingredient really has been that it's not a diversity business. So miraculously, 30% Club has no money, but every company has either done work pro bono, voluntarily for no money, or they have hosted events. We have had an amazing number of events. To be honest, I'm looking forward to Christmas break with all those children. That it has been a very, very busy year. We have had, in some months, 6 or so events. And it only works by everybody playing their part. This is not something that I could impose. It's not something that anybody could impose. And it takes lots and lots of efforts.